guys, my name is Chelsea and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, we have my April wrap-up. So I read 11 books in the month of April, so we're going to basically just jump right on into these. The first thing that I read in the month of April was actually a reread. That is going to be the Foxhole Court, or the All for the Game series by Nora Sakavic. So we have the Foxhole Court, the Raven King, and the King's Men. This is a series that I think I have reread like 3 or 4 times now, and I know that there are some people that absolutely hate this series. I really enjoy it. I have consistently given the first book a 4 out of 5 stars and the other 2 books 5 out of 5 stars. These are books that definitely need trigger warnings. They are not happy stories by any means in general. We do have some LGBTQ elements near the very end of this series, so I know some people have sort of billed them as that, and that is more of just an element in the story. These are not like LGBTQ romances, but it does have that element, and I do appreciate the element that we have in here. We also have a lot of consent in here, especially near the end as well. So I do feel like the author deals with harsh topics very well. However, in the second book, we have trigger warnings for rape. We also have trigger warnings for self-harm. And there is like mobster type of people in here. So there's a lot of violence and everything that basically goes along with that. This follows a fictional team that has a fictional sport in here. I know one of the big, I guess, issues that people have with this series is that it's not very realistic. I am not a big sports person, so the fact that the author made up a fake sport that has fake rules and fake regulations, and the fact that there is a character here who has some sort of medication that he's supposed to take that is not very realistic, doesn't bother me at all. I know some people it does bother. I just really like the writing style. I really like the characters and the character growth over the 3 books, and I don't have any personal triggers, so the fact that even though this book has a lot of very dark, triggering things in it, I am perfectly fine with that because I really like how the characters have to deal with it. My big issue, I guess, with certain people on BookTube is not necessarily just this series, but I did follow a girl, I want to say a couple years ago, who I had just read this, I want to say maybe 6 months to maybe a year before that. Really enjoyed it. It's not necessarily my favorite series, but I do really love the writing and the characterization, and so it is quite up there for me. And I can understand somebody not liking something that I do like. However, everything that she talked about with this series was in a way that made you as a reader, if you did like the series, feel like you were being attacked for liking this series. So she used a lot of very negative language about how there was no reason that anybody should read these books. It was a trash series, the writing is trash, if you read this book you were trash. Trash was used a lot, and it was also used in a way that was very attacking to other people that did like this. It wasn't very constructive in the way that it was talked about. She also, I think, only read the first book of the series, so a lot of the trigger warnings, more of them happen in the later books than in the first one. But I think she was expecting it to be that LGBTQ type of romance that doesn't really happen until much later in the series, and even then that is not the main point of these books. I, ever since then, because I have unfollowed her, have tried to be very constructive in my reviews. If I don't like something, like if you like something that I don't like or vice versa, I don't think we should be attacking the people who read those books just because of you not liking it. Because there are obviously people that like it. These have quite high ratings on Goodreads, and I think it's just, you have to be into these types of books in order to read it. But it had been a couple years since I've actually read these, so I reread them in April. Then I also read the Red Scrolls of Magic by Cassandra Clare and Wesley Chu. This is the first book in the Eldest Curses series. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I absolutely loved it. As I mentioned a little bit in my book haul for April, I haven't finished reading the Dark Artifices series because I'm waiting for other books to come out, and it was just, I'm gonna need to reread Lady Midnight before I sort of continue on and go into Queen of Air and Darkness and all of that. So I was really missing the sort of writing style that Cassandra Clare has in these. You could not tell the difference between the two different writers, so I think they work together really, really well. But this is the book that takes place after City of Glass, where Magnus and Alec are on their European vacation, and crazy things ensue, things that we had never heard about in the Mortal Instruments series, and I'm really enjoying the plot points that we're taking off on this. I'm very excited to see what exactly is going to happen in the second and then third books in this series, since they're sort of going to be interweaved into the other books that are already out. I really enjoyed this book so much. Magnus and Alec are some of my favorite characters from the Mortal Instruments series, and so this was just perfect. In this book, we do have her typical third-person point of view writing style. However, we did get to jump a little bit between focusing on Magnus and focusing on Alec, where they're mostly together throughout this whole thing, but they do have their little bits and pieces where they need to go off and do separate things to sort of solve the problem that's going in here, because of the fact that Magnus obviously is a warlock and Alec is a shadow hunter, and we don't have the alliance sort of stuff that goes on like near the end of the Mortal Instruments series and everything like that. And this just made me fall in love with her writing all over again. I absolutely loved it, and I'm so excited for the next one. Then I also read Super Chill by Adam Ellis. This is a comic artist, I guess I want to say, who I do follow on Instagram, and so I actually picked this up at my pregnancy brain is kicking in. It was one of the Comic-Cons that came to Phoenix this year. I want to say it was the Ace Comic-Con. He was there, and I picked this up while I was there, so I have it signed and everything. I don't know why it's taken me so long to actually pick this up. Some of the comics in here are ones that he has posted on Instagram before, but they're just really nicely drawn. I love his art style. I love the humor in here, and so I gave this a 4 out of 5 stars. It was just a really, really solid read. Then I also read Dodge City by Josh Trujillo and Kara McGee. The main reason I had picked this up previously is I do follow Kara McGee, who is the artist, on Instagram, so I've been following all of her art for a while. This, as far as I am aware, is the only volume of this. It definitely leaves it sort of open at the end for more volumes, more issues in this series, and I really, really hope that we do get more. This I gave a 4 out of 5 stars because I think it was a very solid start to a series, and I'm sure if they do more, I'm going to enjoy those even more. This one is basically just following a dodgeball team, which I believe all the characters are in high school. I could be wrong about that. It's been a little while and my brain is not working the best these days, but I really enjoyed the characterization. I do feel like some of the parts moved a little bit too quickly, and I really wanted more in-depth nature for a lot of the characters and the plot, and I feel like that is mostly because it's a graphic novel. It's a collection of comics, and if they do more, I think they're going to be able to expand it a lot. But I did also really appreciate the diversity in here. We have a female-female romance, we have lots of people of color, and we also have a character who is deaf. So I really would love to see more from this series. I don't think it's a series. I would love to see more from this comic. Then I also read Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. This is a book that I picked up in my last book outlet order, and I don't know exactly why it took me so long to read this book. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I definitely ended up crying during this book, which I've cried at books before. Who knows if it's my pregnancy hormones or not, but it just hit me in such a good way, and if a book can hit my emotions in a certain way, I basically give it a 5 stars. But I absolutely love this story as well. This follows our main character, who is a web comic creator, and she's sort of famous. However, in her real life, she doesn't tell anybody about this because she feels like those are basically two different aspects of who she is. She doesn't want people to see the famous side of her and only see her for that. Well, a new boy comes to her school who ends up being one of the most famous fan fiction writers of her webcomic, and it just sort of deals with her in high school and her anxiety and everything about their relationship related to the webcomic. We do get to see little bits and pieces of her creations in here, which I thought was a really, really nice piece to add. We don't get very much, but like after every chapter we get like a little bit of a picture, sometimes a little bit of a story as well. and I just really enjoyed this. I haven't read anything else by this author, but this book was phenomenal. I absolutely loved it. I loved the characters. I loved how they were dealing with their issues. These were characters that were high schoolers that didn't feel too old or too young. They felt like they could definitely be teenagers in high school, and I just absolutely love this. Then I also read Smashed by Junji Ito. This is his newest collection of short stories. This one has 13 different stories in here. I did give this a 4 out of 5 stars. So all of these stories are going to be individual stories, except for there were 3 in the middle that sort of had an overlap of like certain characters in this. And actually I think those 3 were some of my favorite ones. A couple of them are super creepy, and then one of them was a little bit more humorous, but it was still just drawn in a way that it was still creepy but funny at the same time. He is one of my absolute favorite horror manga artists and creators, and it would be too much detail to like get into all the other stories. Most of them were absolutely amazing. There's a couple that were a little bit weird. I usually don't read short stories, but he has a way of taking his short story, and I think even because maybe it's a manga and not necessarily just a short story, you get the sort of like creepy aspect with the drawings, but you also have this like need to sort of know exactly how it's going to turn out. I almost feel like these are short stories that are very, very similar sometimes to like the Twilight Zone, like the old episodes of the Twilight Zone, where you have this sort of setup and creepy things happen, and then a lot of them have a sort of little twist at the end that like reveals exactly what happens or why it's like that. And I just absolutely love these. Again, I'm giving it a 4 out of 5 stars just because there are a couple short stories in here that weren't as good, but most of it was just amazing. Then I read the first 2 books in the Burberry Prep series by C.M. Stunich. This is a bully romance series, which sounds a little bit weird. I will explain a little bit, but the first book is Filthy Rich Boys, and the second book was Bad Bad Blue Bloods. I gave both of these books a 4 out of 5 stars. C.M. Stunich is one of my absolute favorite independent authors. I feel like she does a really good job with the way her writing is, but also the characterization. I don't think I've ever read a book by her that I did not like. However, I have not read some of her books that I know I most likely would not like because of the plot or the elements that we have in there. So this bully romance series was very on the fence for me. I wasn't too sure whether I was going to like it or not, because I guess the concept of a bully romance, and they're becoming a little bit more prevalent nowadays. Like I'm seeing ads for them more and more, where I hadn't ever really heard of one until she put out this book, is that the male romance, either one guy or multiple guys, depending on if it's a reverse harem romance or not, start off being a bully to the main female character. And in a good bully romance, apparently, you have to have some sort of redemptive arc for the guys in order for it to then turn into a romance, which was part of the reason I actually did pick these up, because she was very adamant, and so were a lot of people that read her books, that she was not going to be one of those people that had a bully romance that was very, very dark, as in there's no specific reason for the bullying and the girl to like the guys, and there's no like actual romance aspect. So I decided to give it a try. I read the first book, finished it in basically 2 days, and then immediately had to pick up the second book. One other thing about C.M. Stunich, she is like a writing machine. I don't know how she does it, but she released the first 2 books in April, and then the third book came out at the very beginning of May, when I'm filming this basically, and I've already finished that. We'll talk about that next month, but she's absolutely crazy because these books have just, I guess, she just has to like get them out there, but the writing is still phenomenal. There's a couple little typo issues just because of the fact that I think she's putting them out so quickly, but there's nowhere near the amount that some other independent authors put out, and so it's absolutely crazy. But we do have the bullying aspect in the first book. So again, there are going to be some trigger warnings for the main aspects of bullying. There's some physical like fighting, there's some definite like calling of names, that kind of thing. We have a previous time where the main character talked about suicidal thoughts and attempts. However, there's nothing in the current present day with that aspect, but just be aware of it. And then in the second book, we have her basically taking revenge on the people that were really, really mean to her. We get to see a little bit more of the guys, not their specific point of view, because it's all from her point of view, which I absolutely love. Like, I hate in books where we have a guy behaving a certain way that is usually mean to the main character, and then we get his point of view and it's all like, but I love her, because that doesn't show me anything. It doesn't show the main character anything. It just is sort of, I feel like, a cop-out for the authors sometimes to prove the guy isn't actually mean, whereas here we had to have a lot of actual showing of the girl that they changed, and so much, much better. But so the first book was good. There was absolutely no romance in the first book, really, because of the fact that we know it's more of the bullying aspect. There is a little touch of romance, a little bit in the second book, but again, the characterization, the overall arc of everything is just so well written that I was able to, I guess, sort of forget the like really, really strict bully aspect of it. Like, again, you know it's a bully romance. You know that they were not completely nice to begin with, but you do get a little hint of like exactly what's going on. Our main character by no means is a weak girl, which I love. She takes it all in stride and she fights back, which I feel like if she didn't do that, I probably would not have enjoyed this book, because it would have been a lot of really dark bullying stuff and a lot of pitying, and there's none of that. It was just better than I even expected. We'll have to see. The fourth book is supposed to be the last one, coming out later in May. But again, a book that I wasn't entirely too sure about, but ended up really enjoying. And then the last book that I read this month is the 7th book in the Vale Diaries series, When the Dead Have It Easy by B.L. Brunner. This is a book that, again, is one of my absolute favorite books. This is another independent published author who I've been absolutely loving. This is the 7th book in the series, so I am not really going to explain much about this book specifically, because there has been so much plot that has already happened in the first 6 books, so you definitely need to start at the beginning. But this is a series that has our main character as sort of a person who lives in the real world, but we have the paranormal aspect of she can see and talk to ghosts, and I just absolutely love it. We have a lot of drama and suspense, and there is some romance in here as well. We're getting more into the romantic aspect in the last half of those 7 books than we did in like the first half of them. But again, the writing is phenomenal. Because it's an independently published author, we do occasionally have those little typos and everything like that, but as this author progresses through the books that she is writing, she is getting so much better at not having those little things pop up as often, and I devoured this book. I think I read the entire thing in one day. I ended up crying at this book as well, mostly at the beginning, and actually that day that I was reading that, I think I cried like 6 times, 2 of them over the fact that we didn't have tortilla chips for chips and salsa. So, pregnancy, but I absolutely loved it, gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. She is one of my favorite authors. I will read basically everything she writes, and so as soon as this book came out at the end of April, I had to read it. And I read it in one sitting on a day that I didn't have work. I think that tells you everything. So those are all the books that I read in April. If you guys liked this video, give it a thumbs up to let me know. Leave me a comment down below letting me know if you've read any of these books. If you have, I would love to hear from you guys. Subscribe to this channel if you would like to see more videos. I have videos up Mondays and Thursdays. So I will see you then. Bye!